Do you find that you're constantly struggling with stress, anxiety, overwhelm, perhaps procrastination, self-confidence issues, or being stuck in your life and not progressing forward? Now, maybe you can take some comfort in the fact that you're not alone, because these struggles are common, but that doesn't mean that they're easy to deal with, does it? The good news is that there is a way to overcome them and live a life that's relatively free of these constant inner battles. In this class, we're going to learn exactly what inner struggles actually are, and then we'll take a deep dive into the root causes of them, and after that, we'll look at practical strategies that you can use to overcome them. So if you're ready to transform your life and start living the life that you've always dreamt of, let's get started. As I've said already, many of us are held back by our inner struggles, and so we're not living as fully and as successfully and as happily as we believe that we should be. So what do we mean by inner struggles? Well, when we have them, we feel some sort of emotional turmoil at times. It often feels as if part of us is fighting another part. We're fighting within ourselves. And we might also have some difficulty getting into what's called a flow state. And that's a state in which everything just seems to be going pretty much as it should. So in the end, we feel as if we're not living our best life. Now, we're not talking about medical issues, things such as major trauma, PTSD, depression, significant psychological issues, etc. These are outside the scope of this particular presentation. And while we're not talking specifically about the normal everyday stresses that we all experience from time to time, many of the concepts, tools, and techniques that I will introduce you to will help you with those as well. Now, as we go through life, we hope that our path forward will look something like this. It's a pretty well-defined path. We can see where we're going, no apparent obstacles, but we don't really know what's around the bend there, do we? And that's the way life really is. Sometimes it can actually look like this, and it's made a lot worse if we've got inner struggles holding us back. How do we deal with all these challenges? Now, before we go on, I just want to mention this. I'm going to make a very special offer at the end of this presentation. It's an offer I've never made before, and it's time limited. So I hope you stick with me, and I hope you get a lot out of it so that you can take advantage of that very special time limited offer. So what do I mean by inner struggles? Well, to give a clearer picture, I want to give you some examples. And to make it easier to follow, I've broken the different types of inner struggles that people might struggle with into 5 main categories. And they are as follows. You're feeling a reduced sense of self-worth. You're feeling stressed and anxious. You're feeling stuck and not moving forward in life. You're feeling burnt out, or you're feeling unhappy and sad. Of course, as I've said, we all experience these emotions from time to time, and that's totally normal. And we often experience a combination of them as well. But the inner struggles that I'm talking about here are those sustained emotional issues that have a significantly negative impact on your life, on your work, on your relationships, your health, and other areas of your life too. What are the costs of these inner struggles? Well, some of the possible costs to you and your loved ones could include you experience a loss of self-worth or self-esteem, and if this happens, that can have a negative impact on many areas of your life. You might start having emotional problems, or financial problems, or relationship problems, or health problems, or career, work, or business problems. Now, some of these costs might not be obvious, or might be partially hidden, or they might not have accumulated yet to the extent that they become apparent. So you might really be unaware of what it's actually costing you. So what would you rather feel? Instead of feeling a reduced sense of self-worth or confidence, maybe you'd rather feel far more confident. Instead of feeling stressed, maybe you'd rather feel far more relaxed. Instead of feeling stuck, maybe you'd rather feel more able to move forward without being held back. Instead of feeling burnt out, maybe you'd rather feel refreshed and easily able to meet any challenge that life might throw at you. Instead of feeling deeply sad or unhappy, maybe you'd rather feel much happier and more relaxed and much more able to enjoy your life. So who am I to be talking about this? Well, just a little bit about me so that you have some good idea as to whether it's a good investment of your time to listen to me. My name is Lee D. Wilson. I'm a Master Executive Mindset Coach. I'm an internationally published author. A couple of books include Overcoming Financial Stress and Feeling Good When Things Go Bad, and so on. I've been coaching formally since 2005 and coached informally for many years before that, both in industry and in academia. My earlier career was a structural engineer, in which I was very successful, and as an engineer I was basically a problem solver. So I've brought that into my coaching and personal development work. I started 4 successful different businesses at different times and rose to become a CEO of a medium-sized business owned by others. So I've had a pretty broad life experience, and I bring that into my work. So how about some testimonials about who I am? I receive them from time to time from grateful clients who I unfortunately forget too often to ask for them, but there's a lot on my website, and I won't spend time on them here. I'll just quickly go through them, but you can look at my website, executivebreakthrough.com, for a much clearer picture. So just a whole lot of them there. I won't dwell on them at this point. So when are these inner struggles a particular problem? You might find that you regularly get into situations in which you become aware of a range of limiting emotions and feelings that somehow create problems for you, making it harder to meet the challenges that these situations present. For example, in everyday life, they might occur in particular recurrent situations. You might find that situations occur recurrently, and every time these negative feelings or emotions crop up. Or you might find when you're facing a significant challenge in life, suddenly you're facing this challenge and suddenly these inner struggles hold you back. Or maybe you're going through a significant transition, such as getting a promotion or being fired, maybe getting married, maybe having children, having a broken marriage, the death of a loved one, and these inner struggles suddenly become apparent for you. So we're going to talk about emotions now, and they are a very important part of our inner struggles, because the inner struggles arise from our emotions. So let's look at that. What are emotions exactly? Well, Wikipedia defines them as mental states brought on by neurophysiological changes which are variously associated with thoughts, feelings, behavioural responses, and a degree of pleasure or displeasure. There's actually, funnily enough, currently no scientific consensus on the definition of what emotions actually are, but we're all very much aware of what they are when they exist. In simple terms, emotions are mental and physiological response to a thought or a situation which acts as a trigger. So it's important to note that they involve both a mental and a physical response, and removing either of these removes the emotion. Generally, emotions come and go, but they can in situations linger far longer than we would like, and this can give rise to inner struggles. The role of emotions in our lives is important. They act as our personal sat-nav, guiding us through life away from things that are harmful and towards things that are good and pleasurable. Their primary aims are to keep us safe, so as to enable the continued propagation of our species. So your emotions are very important to your survival, and they help protect you. They also help motivate you, and of course they add a great deal of quality to your life when they're good emotions. But sometimes they act in a way that's not in your best interests. Negative emotions can linger if we ignore the warnings that they are offering, if we're not paying attention to them, or if we're unable to respond to their warnings at that time. They can remain stuck on if we regularly ignore them, rather like an alarm system that's developed some sort of fault. Negative emotions occur so that the pain of a negative event creates a learning experience for us to help us remain safe, as I've already said. To ensure that we learn from a negative experience, they remain imprinted in our memories far more indelibly than positive experiences. This is known as a negative cognitive bias, which is negatively biased thinking, and you might be aware of that. This negativity bias tends to overlook good news and to highlight bad news, which over time can tend to create anxiety and pessimism. Our survival has required that we have this negative bias in our recollection and our memory so that we learn to avoid these unpleasant and perhaps dangerous experiences. Furthermore, we also tend to compound our suffering by the way we react and the way we think about our unpleasant experiences. So what can we do to avoid having a lifetime of angst, of negative memories that we're building up as we live our lives, so we can live happily and avoid negative things such as anxiety, depression, overwhelm, and all these other negative emotional effects of a lot of negative memories Well, we'll address that later. Our negative cognitive bias is made worse by our confirmation bias, which is the tendency to search for, interpret, favour and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. I've heard it described this way, that we've got two parts to our mind. We've got a thinker and a prover. And what the thinker thinks, the prover goes about proving as being correct. Our survival has required that we have this negative bias in our recollection and our memory, so that we learn to avoid these unpleasant and possibly dangerous experiences. The conscious mind versus the unconscious mind. I want to use the iceberg as a metaphor to discuss the relevant sizes of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. We all know that an iceberg floats in the water, so we only see about 20% of it above surface level. 80% of it is below surface level. And I'm saying that the conscious mind is represented by the part of the iceberg that's above water level, and the unconscious mind is the 80% that's below the water level. And it's assumed here that we're talking about the mind as being made up of two parts, the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And I'm breaking it up this way for simplicity. And I want to explore the different roles of the conscious mind and the unconscious mind with respect to our inner struggles, because that's very important. While we're aware of the things going on in our conscious mind, of course, the processes of our unconscious minds are hidden from our view. It's said that the unconscious mind is responsible for about 85% of our mental and emotional activity and responses to events. So while we're aware of our conscious minds, because they're conscious, let's look a little bit more closely at the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is thought to process information and experiences that are beyond our conscious awareness. This means that it can have a significant impact on our thoughts, feelings and behaviours, even though we might not be consciously aware of it. It can also play a role in regulating our physiological processes, things such as our heart rate, our breathing, our digestion, and these can be disrupted when unconscious processes are disturbed, such as during having a sleep disorder or during a trauma. The unconscious mind is often associated with processing of automatic behaviours, such as habits or routines. For example, if you've been driving a car for a long time, you can be more or less drive on autopilot, with the unconscious mind handling many of the driving tasks, can't it? It can also shape our conscious thoughts and emotions, such as through unconscious biases and prejudices, which can impact our decision making and our behaviour. The unconscious mind can also play a role in shaping our beliefs and attitudes. For example, it can unconsciously influence our perceptions and our judgments based on past experiences, cultural background and biases. Some more functions of the unconscious mind include information processing, in which it unconsciously processes and stores information that's too rapid or too complex for conscious thought. It can be involved with emotional regulation, in which it regulates emotions, impulses and drives that might be unacceptable or harmful. Habit formation. It also helps establish habits and automated behaviours based on past experiences. Motivation. It provides the unconscious drive for fulfilling basic needs and desires, such as hunger, thirst and sexuality. Repression. It keeps unpleasant or traumatic memories hidden from conscious awareness. Dream formation. It plays a role in creating and interpreting dreams, which can serve as a source of insight and creativity. Research in neuroscience is helping to shed light on the workings of the unconscious mind and how it interacts with conscious processes. So there's a lot more to be learnt about it. Basically, our unconscious minds strive to keep us safe, and they're somewhat childlike in the way they go about it, viewing the world in a rather simplistic way as it does so. So what actually are the causes of your inner struggles? Let's talk about that now. There are both conscious and unconscious causes to our inner struggles. So first of all, let's look at the conscious causes. Let's imagine something bad happens to us, which will happen from time to time. If we're able to do something about it, we can often quickly let go of the negative emotions because they're acting appropriately in response to a signal that they are giving us. Sometimes, however, we can't do anything about the situation, and we get these negative emotions that we find ourselves resisting. We resist the situation, and there's a saying that says, what we resist persists. I use the analogy of beach balls. So imagine we're in a swimming pool and we're trying to keep the beach balls immersed under the water level, keep them submerged so they can't be seen. Yet they keep trying to bob up no matter what we do. And of course, doing that requires an expenditure of energy, a lot of energy, on an ongoing basis. And that's what the saying, what you resist persists, represents. There you are trying to resist these negative emotions, keeping the beach balls under the water, but it's very tiring and it wears you out over time. If we dwell on our problems, we can get into a negative thought spiral that can look like this. Let's say something happens to us to cause us to have a series of thoughts in response to that trigger. This in turn produces a physiological response, a set of feelings in our body, and at some level we become aware of these feelings, this physiological response, and depending on the context we decide that it has caused a certain emotion as we interpret that trigger. That emotion then colours the original thought. We go back to the original thought and we've decided it means something bad, and that can then reinforce the physiological response or feeling, and then around and round we go. So here is an example of a typical negative thought loop. Chronic stress can give rise to overwhelm, which in turn can give rise to anxiety. And when you're feeling anxious, decisions become difficult and it can be hard to move forward. So you're more likely to procrastinate. And not surprisingly, all this can put a big dent in your self-confidence, which in turn can create more stress. Each of these negative emotions can magnify the others, and as you go round and round in this cycle of negative thinking, your spirits can spiral downwards, making it very difficult to live and work productively, to make wise decisions, and to think creatively about the problems giving rise to your chronic stress. Does this sound familiar to you at all? So it can be very important to break these negative cycles, these negative inner struggles. I address ways of doing this using the conscious mind techniques in my blog posts, articles, books, videos, etc. And I hope that you find these helpful, and I suggest you look them up regularly. But the problems can be magnified by unconscious programming that has occurred earlier in your life. And because this programming is in your unconscious, it can be very difficult for you to work on all by yourself. As we keep going around one of these loops, these negative thought loops, our thoughts can become increasingly more negative. And so we can become more pessimistic and even less creative in finding ways to deal with the initial triggering event. Problems are better dealt with when we're in an up state, which is where we find ourselves to be feeling much better and more positive and creative and energized in solving our problems, rather than when we're in a down state, when the future looks bleak and our minds are filled with all our fears and worries. So it's important to break this spiral, and we can do this by interrupting the negative thought loop in some way. And I'll talk about that later. Now let's talk about unconscious causes of our inner struggles. Typically, we can tell if we're dealing with unconscious issues if they're persistent and consistent. That is, they keep arising in the same types of situations over and over. Or maybe we find ourselves overreacting in certain situations. Our emotions get too much, overblown. Persistent problems that can't be resolved consciously are often due to long-forgotten events that possibly occurred in our childhood. So these persistent issues that we are aware of are often simply symptoms of the underlying problem. Many solutions that people offer only deal with the symptoms rather than the underlying cause. And they leave you feeling like this. Now, to understand all of this better and how it might come about, I want to talk about the different stages of childhood development, according to some childhood experts. There are 4 stages that are defined as being important. Ages 0 to 7, which is known as the imprint period. Ages 7 to 14, which is known as the modelling period. ages 14 to 21, which is the socialisation period, and some childhood experts also define ages 21 onwards as when you develop your business persona. So the ages 0 to 7, the imprint period, is when we accept everything we're told as being true, especially if it comes from our parents or principal caregivers. Of course, this is very important for our safety, as we can assume that they have our best interests at heart and they know much more about the world than we do with our undeveloped minds. As a result, our minds are like sponges, absorbing everything presented to us. I remember discussing this with a client once, and he said that reminded him of a time when he was 5 years old, and after watching a Superman movie, he put on his Superman cape and jumped off his shed roof believing that he could fly. Unfortunately, he found painfully that he couldn't. The blind belief over these years can lead to underlying confusion and trauma, which can cause problems later in life if they're not dealt with correctly. I wonder, for example, what would happen in a situation in which a mother and a father have opposing views on an important subject and the young child attempts to uncritically accept both points of view simultaneously. I guess this can lead to what are called parts being created in the mind, in which, for example, someone might feel that part of me believes this and part of me believes something different. Talking about the imprint period, it often amazes me how confidently my 4-year-old granddaughter can make assertions about things. I often wish I could be so confident. I wish I could see things so black and white as she does. But of course, that's because she's accepted everything she's been told as being 100% true. Now, again, in the imprint period, at this time, our minds are a bit like the unconscious minds of adults. And this period plays an important part in the development of our sense of right and wrong, good and bad, and that can last for the rest of our life. Along with the good, it's during this period that many of the limiting beliefs, decisions and emotions can be laid down in our young unconscious minds. Now, we've been talking about conscious mind problems. Our unconscious mind problems often arise from the ages of 0 to 7, which, as I've explained, is the imprint period, or to a lesser extent between the ages of 7 to 14, which was called the modelling period. Over these times, this is where we often create and store our limiting beliefs about ourselves and about the world at large. We create and store our limiting decisions and also our limiting emotions. As a child, limiting beliefs often arise when the child is confronted with an overwhelming emotional experience. The unconscious mind of the child grapples with it and tries to find an appropriate reaction to deal with the experience. However, the solutions that the child devises are those from the mind of a child, of course, and because children are unable to think abstractly at a young age, they might not interpret the situation accurately and could form erroneous conclusions, assuming that the actions or words that cause the emotion are the absolute truth. Even if adopting these beliefs solved the problem way back then in some way, they may well not be appropriate to the problems faced in adult life, which can then cause problems later on. They can also be caused by significant adults in the child's life repeating a particular belief over and over, such as, "You're lazy, you're clumsy, you always mess things up." Because they are embedded in our unconscious mind at such a young age, it can be very difficult to become aware of them and to replace them by new and more empowering beliefs. And until the root emotion of the limiting belief is dealt with, it'll keep resurfacing, and no amount of mindset practices or affirmations will make it go away completely. So what are some examples of limiting belief? They might be things like, "I'm not good enough," or "I'm not good at reading, writing, arithmetic, making friends, sport, music, talking in public. I'm no good with money. I'm unattractive. Money is the source of evil. No one will love me. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. No one really cares about me. No one listens to me. It's dangerous to talk to strangers. People will reject me if I show my true self." Surprising how common that is. "It's better to expect the worst, then I won't be disappointed. You have to work too hard to be wealthy. Wealthy people are mean, greedy, unhappy, evil. I'm too stupid, fat, ugly to be loved. All women, men cheat, are mean, are violent, are drama queens, are only after one thing. as I said, I've listed about 120 limiting beliefs on my blog. You might want to check them out and see if any of them resonate with you at all. It might give you some insight into some of your limiting beliefs. So how do limiting beliefs hold us back? Well, they limit us from realising our full potential because, well, they are limiting. They can cause us emotional pain, inner conflict and turmoil, or inner struggles when they conflict with our conscious minds. And they can prevent us from revealing our true selves for fear of being hurt. And that can be limiting. They can limit our career ambitions and progress. They can negatively impact us financially, which can be very expensive. And they can keep us in unhealthy relationships or even stop us from forming healthy ones, and so on. A couple of examples might be interesting. These are colourful examples and they're certainly not representative at all. In fact, with the work I do, often clients don't even remember what their limiting beliefs were when we finished sessions together. But these two stand out in my mind. There was a client who was frightened of water. And in fact, he was so frightened of it, he refused to go in water above knee level. And it turned out, after working with him for some time, we found out that his mother had taught him to be fearful of water because as a very young child, they lived near a very big river. And she was really worried that somehow the child might go down to the banks of the river and fall in for some reason or somehow. And so she taught him to be frightened of the river. She taught him that there were dragons and dangerous creatures in the river. So he became very frightened of it and never went too close to it. Now, of course, they moved away. He grew up and eventually forgot about that lesson that his mother had taught him. But what lingered with him was this fear of water. And it wasn't until he did some work that he was able to let go of this fear. And of course, that had been very limiting for him. He was unable to go swimming in swimming pools or down the beach, and he missed out on a lot of fun. And whenever he was near deep water, he became quite fearful. Another untypical example, but quite colourful and interesting, was a client who was unable to form close relationships. He was a guy probably in his early 40s, and he had, throughout his life, he'd not been able to form close relationships, either in a romantic sense or even with respect to friendships. We managed to track this down to the fact that as a young child, very young child, his family had visited some family friends who had a farm. And he ran out the back to play in the farm and came up to a shed, and leaning beside the wall of this shed was an old wagon wheel. Somehow he managed to get stuck. The wagon wheel must have fallen on top of him, and he was stuck and he couldn't get out. He cried and cried for help, and no one would come and save him. Eventually he had to save himself. Now, of course, it might have only been for a few minutes, but in the mind of a child that might have seemed like an eternity. But as he managed to free himself, he resolved that he could never rely on anyone else to help him when he was in a difficult situation. He couldn't trust others at all. He could only rely on himself. And of course, he carried that belief, which he eventually forgot the original incident, but carried it forward in life. And that harmed his ability to form close relationships, which is obviously very, very limiting for him. Now, once he was able to recall that event and let go of that limiting belief, life obviously changed much the better for him. Now, of course, conscious causes can overlap with unconscious causes. So how do we deal with these issues? As I've said several times, many of us are held back by our inner struggles, and we're not living as fully or as happily as we believe that we should be. So how do we deal with these issues? So are you sick and tired of fighting with yourself? Do you ever feel like tearing your hair out because you're so sick of it? Well, because some of the issues are conscious and some are unconscious, we can do a lot to loosen the grip of our conscious issues by using methods such as the following. A well-known form of therapy is called cognitive behavioural therapy. This type of therapy uses logic to dispute the less than rational thought patterns that we have. It's regarded as a gold standard form of therapy because it's been researched very thoroughly and it's pretty easy to research. It's best done under the guidance of a skilled therapist, and it's been demonstrated to be effective for a range of problems, including depression, anxiety disorders, alcohol and drug use problems, marital problems, eating disorders, and severe mental illness. This form of treatment usually involves efforts to change thinking patterns. And the strategies might include learning to recognize any distortions in thinking that are creating the problems and then re-evaluating them in the light of reality, gaining a better understanding of the behaviour and motivation of others, using problem-solving skills to cope with difficult situations, learning to develop a greater sense of confidence in one's own ability. Another method is the practice of mindfulness. This involves regular practice, which then makes it easier to think mindfully in daily life. The main thrust is to learn how to live and think in the moment, in the now. It focuses on helping you become skillful at observing your own thought patterns and not getting caught up in them. Now, it's a very useful life skill to develop, and I strongly recommend it to my clients. Many of us spend much of our time regretting things that happened in the past or worrying about things that might happen in the future. Mindfulness helps us learn to break those habits and focus all our attention on the present moment. Now, mindfulness is a basic human ability to be fully present, fully aware of where we are and what we're doing right now, and not be overly reactive or too overwhelmed by what's going on around us. It's a quality that every human being already possesses, so it's not something you have to conjure up. You just have to learn to access it. Young children do it very easily. So the way it works is to typically set aside a short period of time each day to practice mindfulness, and as the skill develops, you become able to bring this into your everyday life. I've got an inexpensive ebook available in the shop on my blog, executivebreakthrough.com, called Mindfulness for Busy People, and I'm sure you'll find that helpful as you learn to become more mindful. Another really important skill is that of reframing, and this involves learning to reframe challenging situations so that you look for the good or the lessons they can offer, no matter how bad they might seem at the time. Practice regularly, it can become a default way of looking at the world. It can be very helpful in dealing with challenges in the moment. It enables you to view the world from a different perspective, looking for the positive and the good in everything, rather than the bad or unpleasant, which most people tend to do. I think it might be a bit similar to the way comedians must view the world, where they look for a joke out of everything, no matter how small or minor. So this too is a very powerful skill to develop, and I talk about this quite a bit in a lot of my posts and other media. Another skill is that of pattern interrupts. This involves interrupting negative thought patterns in some way, and reframing is an example of this. Because of the link between physiology and emotions, changing physiology can interrupt these negative thought patterns. For example, some research suggests that regular exercise can be as helpful in breaking patterns of anxiety or depression as antidepressants. I have been a distant runner for many years of my life, and I've found that to be enormously beneficial. Whenever I'm stressed or anxious or worried about something or just fed up, I go for a run. It's a magnificent pattern interrupt, and even if I'm not feeling quite so good when I'm running, I'll inevitably feel much better afterwards. I strongly urge you to develop your own pattern interrupts. It might be going for a walk, it might be deep breathing, it might be going outside, getting out in the fresh air and sunshine. Develop your own pattern interrupt to help break these negative thought loops that we're talking about. Another skill is that of emotional freedom technique, and this involves interrupting negative thought patterns by tapping on certain meridians or acupuncture points. You do this sort of thing. It's a bit hard with glasses on. You tap on these meridian points. Very, very simple. Just tap gently 5 or 6 times at each point. And of course, this can be done discreetly at times. You can even do it by rubbing on the edges of your nails, and I teach this. I outline this in some detail in my book called Feeling Good When Things Go Bad. It's similar to acupuncture. An EFT focuses on meridian points or energy hotspots to restore the balance in your body's energy. It's believed that restoring this energy balance can relieve symptoms that might have resulted from a negative experience or emotion. Based on Chinese medicine, meridian points are thought of as areas of the body through which energy flows. These pathways help balance energy flow to maintain your health. Any imbalance in them can influence disease or sickness. While acupuncture uses needles to apply pressure to these energy points, EFT uses fingertip tapping to apply the pressure. Tapping helps you access your body's energy and to send signals to the part of the brain that controls stress. By stimulating the meridian points through EFT tapping, you can reduce stress or negative emotion you feel from an issue, ultimately restoring balance to your disrupted energy. Globally, many millions of people use this every day. It's very, very simple, and I urge you to try it. Don't take my word for it, just try it out. Another way of dealing with these issues consciously is talk therapy or psychotherapy. This involves talking about your problems, getting your troubles off your chest in a safe place. Now, this can be helpful, but care must be taken to avoid locking in these negative emotions and experiences. This type of therapy is not uncommon to go on for many, many months. You hear of people being in therapy for years. Talk therapy teaches you new and helpful ways of coping with distress and its impact on your life. It can help you find healing from anxiety, depression, trauma, and other mental health-related symptoms, conditions, and issues. And the benefit is it gives you a chance to talk to someone who's trustworthy and who is unbiased about your mental health issues, and it can positively impact your life and your lived experiences. It may reduce your long-term mental health risks and conditions, of course. However, you might feel uncomfortable talking with a stranger about your deepest feelings and emotions. It can take time to see progress or results from the treatment, and it can feel like a major time commitment. Another way of dealing with this more consciously is to meditate. Meditation involves quietening the mind to interrupt the negative thought loops that we've talked about already. And it can be a very helpful practice to adopt, and it's actually an extension of practicing mindfulness with a greater focus on the practice sessions. Another important skill is to set boundaries. Carefully think through the boundaries that you need to set for yourself, for your own self-care and for your relationships with others, so you can get on top of these issues, these inner struggles. Now, it's important to enroll others in these decisions so that they will support you as you work to overcome these inner struggles consciously. By enroll, I mean that you carefully explain to them the boundaries that you're setting and why you're doing it, why you're setting these boundaries. As you go through this, ask them for their support in helping you to achieve the outcome you hope for when deciding on the boundaries that you want to set for yourself. This might be appropriate if you decided you wanted to stop smoking, or go on a Get Fit campaign, or stop drinking alcohol, and so on. Now, we've talked about ways of dealing with the issues consciously. Let's talk about ways of dealing with them unconsciously. Of course, to let go of our unconscious issues, we need to get in touch with our unconscious minds. This can be difficult to do by yourself because it's a bit like looking at the back of your head. You need some form of assistance, such as a mirror, to do this, don't you? It's a myth that we can just ignore them. Over time, life can just make things worse. So dealing with them unconsciously, we can use some of the following methods. Traditional hypnosis. This involves being guided into a trance-like state by a therapist. It enables the therapist to distract your conscious mind so that he or she can make positive suggestions to your unconscious mind that will help you solve your problems. While this can be effective, the following difficulties can arise. The therapist will be working on the symptoms that you describe at the outset when you start the sessions with him or her, because that's all you're aware of. The actual cause is buried in your unconscious mind. Furthermore, therapists often use standard scripts, and they might not be appropriate because, as I've just said, the presenting problem is generally not the real problem, and clients really have a standard problem that can be affected by a standard script. Another problem with this is that some therapists try to impose a solution rather than letting you work out the solution in your own mind. Nevertheless, I do have therapeutic audio tracks on my website which you can purchase, and they certainly can be very helpful in reducing the symptoms, even if they don't solve the underlying problems. So I sort of urge you to use them if you want to reduce the symptoms of your inner struggles. So how can I help you with your inner struggles? Well, I've got a method that I call my Rapid Breakthrough Therapeutic Coaching Method. And while I adopt and adapt many of the methods described above where appropriate, my Rapid Breakthrough therapeutic coaching methods can bring about the most rapid and the most impactful breakthroughs. I work on the basis that we personally have all the resources that we need to solve these problems, these inner struggles, and that it's only a matter of helping my clients get in touch with those resources. By having a carefully constructed conversation about your problems, I can help you get in touch with your inner wisdom, enabling you to quickly let go of your inner struggles. Clients sometimes have massive breakthroughs even in a single session, and that's one of the unique outcomes of this method. In fact, once clients have let go of their inner struggles, it's not uncommon for them to be even able to remember what they were. Not only do these changes enable you to quickly let go of your inner struggles, but they often bring about a positive change in many other areas of your life. So once we let go of our inner struggles in the original area, we often solve issues in other areas. It can be quite magical and quite life-changing in a sort of global sense. I use the analogy of having a knot in a rope. Our emotional problems can be persistent when our thinking gets caught up in knots. In the work that I do with my clients, I help them quickly and easily untie these knots. So once we've removed these knots, our thinking becomes untwisted and our inner struggles dissipate. So what happens next? Many people are held back by their inner struggles and are not living as fully and happily as they believe that they should be, as I've already said. They won't get better until they address the underlying cause. So as far as your inner struggles are concerned, what is that costing you in terms of your happiness, relationships, your health? What's that costing you financially? Imagine these inner struggles slowly getting worse over the next 10 years, which is entirely possible. So what can you do? So to tackle your problems consciously, I urge you to check out my social media posts, my website at executivebreakthrough.com for tips on dealing with these issues. You can also check me out on the socials, on social media, and look me up under my full name, Lee D. Wilson. So on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Lee D. Wilson, and the same on the other platforms. Look out for other products such as books, ebooks, trainings, and videos that I have and will continue to produce that will help you further. Many of these things are well worth doing from a quality of life perspective, regardless of the inner struggles. Many of these conscious methods. And while they'll give you short and medium-term relief from the symptoms, they're unlikely to help you get to the root causes of your inner struggles. For your unconscious problems, I urge you to carefully consider how much these issues are costing you with respect to your finances, your relationships, your health, your quality of life, etc. Look at what your life will be like, say, in 5 or 10 years' time if you do nothing. Reflect on whether you're going to continue living as a victim to these issues or whether you're going to take full responsibility for your life and well-being and do something about it. Having carefully thought through all I've talked about so far, if you find that you're fully committed to making a change, book a free strategy session with me so we can discuss your issues and decide whether we're a good fit to work on them together. Now, I have a limited availability, and so it is a case of the first in, best dressed. Now, as a coach, I like to reward action takers, and so there is a significant, very significant, time-limited 20% discount on my normal fees for those who act promptly after viewing this video and mention that you viewed it to me. Now, I must emphasize that this is intended to be a time-limited offer available for only a short period of time. So as you make the decision to book that strategy call with me, here are some testimonials on my rapid breakthrough therapeutic coaching methods.
Hi, I just had a session with the most amazing therapist called Lee. The session was phenomenal. I came to him because I was having blocks in my business. I was feeling really stuck with trying to promote my business on social media. I was really concerned with what people thought of me, and this was blocking me and keeping me stuck from moving forward. After just one session with Lee, I feel amazing. I feel so motivated. We got to the root cause of what was blocking me, which was so important because I didn't even realise that that's what was actually blocking me. So Lee just held such a beautiful space, a healing space for me to do my work. The trance was amazing. It felt so good. I was so relaxed. I was in such good hands. So thank you so much, Lee. I feel phenomenal. I feel amazing, and I can't wait to get on with my business.
Hi everybody, my name's Aaron. I just want to give some feedback on an amazing session that I had the other day with a therapist named Lee Wilson. Lee was absolutely fantastic. This session just went very smoothly. Lee made me feel safe, and without even realising it, we worked out what the actual issue was that I was dealing with. I started off with procrastination in my business. I thought I was procrastinating, and it ended up to be something totally different. And it's been a few days now and things have settled in, and I absolutely feel amazing. I feel a lot more comfortable in what I need to do now, and I just really want to thank Lee for helping me out. Anybody that needs help with any issue regarding procrastination or your work, or maybe just a problem you have, I highly recommend you seek out Lee. He was fantastic. Thanks again, Lee.
Hi there everyone. I just wanted to do this brief video. I've had a couple of sessions with Lee, and I just wanted to say that it's just been incredible. Often you look at what you think a surface problem, or issue that you're having is it. And having this wonderful conversation with Lee, who made it so easy and simple, has been really enlightening for me. I discovered a few things and learnt about myself, something that was bothering me. And, there was actually a couple of things that we ended up working on over a couple of different sessions, which was amazing. And I've had some phenomenal breakthroughs, and I just wanted to send this out. So, if anyone is contemplating catching up with Lee and having a chat with him, please do it, because you're going to find things out about yourself through discussing it with him that you may not have known. And it's just been such a wonderful journey and pleasure, and it was because of Lee prompting things in me to find out about myself. And I've just had some really good breakthroughs that, I just can't say enough about it, and I'm really appreciative of it. And that's why I wanted to do this little video and send it out to him. And all going well, he posts it up, and get onto it. You're going to love what he does. He's a magician.
So I hope you found that helpful. Now I just want to remind you that there is a very special time-limited offer of a really significant discount, a 20% discount on my fees, and that is a case of first in, best dressed. So if you're interested in letting go your inner struggles once and for all, this is a wonderful opportunity for you. And it can often only take just a couple of sessions, maybe one or two, or not very many, depending on your issues, and then you will be free of them. So to start that, book a free one-on-one chat with me to discuss your problems. And then we can see how I might be able to help you, and also to check that we're a good fit for each other. Now, if all that works, we'll then be able to book some sessions to free you from these inner struggles once and for all. And to get that started, go to my blog at executivebreakthrough.com. I'll repeat that, executivebreakthrough.com. And further down the page, you'll see a link to book a strategy call with me. Or you can also find links on my social media profiles. So message me if you have any further questions. Thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful. I've wanted to make it as constructive as I possibly can. You've now got some techniques that you can start to implement straight away to tackle your conscious issues, and you've got a way of tackling your unconscious issues as well by getting in touch with me. So I look forward to working with you and freeing you from these unnecessary problems.